After what was undoubtedly a hectic weekend, first calling off my wedding on Saturday, thereby disappointing my ex-fiancée, family, and perhaps the entire town, then just yesterday, which was a Sunday, I was appointed mayor of the wonderful city of H and became a partner at HW Town Insurance and Associates, now of course called Towns and Kurtz Associates. I expected the week would not be without its challenges and would demand expert time management. As I laid down to bed last night, I made a promise to myself that I would think forward, stay aware of my surroundings, and not allow myself or my thoughts to get pulled in a million different directions. I have a tendency to daydream, and before I know it, I find myself in a new place without remembering how I got there. I also have a bad habit of over-explaining, second-guessing myself, and perseverating on thoughts. No, I resolved the night before to wake up at 5:01 a.m., which I had done, and plan my day out and stick to the agenda. No more perseverating. I would only move forward. Not that perseverating on thoughts is an entirely bad thing. Perseverating on thoughts allows me to examine past situations and behaviors so that I might continually improve myself and my productivity. For example, this morning I woke up at 5:01 a.m. because I have an aversion to waking up at the top of the hour. By analyzing my past behavior, I found that waking up exactly when the hour begins opens the door for laziness. I'll just sleep another 1 or so minutes, I might think to myself. But before I know it, I've snoozed and might already be 5 minutes into the hour. 5 minutes might seem like nothing, but when someone with as much responsibility as me, specifically duties that require unwavering attention at work, carving out time to spend with my mother, and fulfilling countless obligations to keep the town running smoothly, I don't have 5 minutes to spare. No, I've discovered that waking up just 1 minute after the hour begins kicks me into gear. It's a mind game, you see. I feel extra motivated when the hour has begun, and I'm already 1 minute, exactly 1 minute, and no more and no less, behind schedule. It makes me feel there's always some catching up to do, moving me ever forward throughout the day. I was thinking of this very habit while I was shaving. Shaving is a routine enough task, so no harm would be done if I allowed myself room for daydreaming. Well, no, I shouldn't say daydreaming. Rather, I was analyzing my behavior and considering whether or not waking up at 5:01 a.m. made me any more or less productive. But now that I had thought about it, was it really worth losing 1 minute every morning to jumpstart my day? Why was I forcing myself to wake up every day in a panic? Surely the first thing I think every morning shouldn't be, "Why, I've already lost a minute. Time to get moving, Arthur," and jumping out of bed with a shot. Waking up anxious means I need to then take time to settle and organize my thoughts. This certainly doesn't keep the ball moving down the field, to borrow a phrase. Perhaps tomorrow I'd set the alarm for 5 a.m. on the nose and give myself that extra minute to wake up and calmly put together an agenda for the day. I wished I had put my new plan into practice this very morning, especially considering everything I had to accomplish today. But I had already woken up and the day had been put into motion. And like I said, I had resolved last night not to look backward, only forward, and to keep my attention focused on the task at hand. Tomorrow morning, I will wake up at 5 a.m., I made myself say out loud, and on top of that, I will live in the moment, not allow myself to become distracted, and stick to the plan whatever it might be. No sooner had I spoken those words when the grandfather clock went off downstairs and chimed that it was 7 in the morning. I looked at myself in the mirror, and the shaving cream had long since dried to my face. Had I really obsessed over when I should wake up in the morning for so long that I had completely lost track of time? I rushed into the bedroom to check the alarm clock next to my bed, and sure enough, it was 7 a.m. 7:01 a.m. to be exact. That left me no time to plan out my day while enjoying a cup of coffee and a reasonable breakfast. Already I had wasted 2 hours that I couldn't spare. There was simply no way I could finish shaving, have a toilet, and catch the streetcar in time to make it to Towns and Kurtz Associates for my first official day as partner of the firm. This was a terrible precedent to set. I could only imagine what the junior executives would say when they watched me come in 10 minutes late. "There goes Herr Kurtz, all hot to trot, thinking he doesn't have to put in an honest day's work like the rest of us," they'd whisper to one another. I'd lose their respect well before I could even settle into the role. Not to mention what a disappointment I'd be to Mr. H.W. Towns, who had put his heart and soul into building H.W. Towns Insurance and Associates from the ground up, and further taking the risk to bring me on as a partner. I couldn't guess at what he'd say to me. If I were lucky, he'd dismiss me on the spot. Being dismissed on the spot and ordering me out of the building would be a far better option for me than getting a simple slap on the wrist, than having to face him day in and day out, knowing I'd lost his respect. However, if he sacked me at once, he'd need to go through the trouble of renaming the firm from Towns and Kurtz Associates back to H.W. Towns Insurance and Associates. Not only would that be a hassle in itself, but he'd need to explain to our customers why the name had changed, and then changed back. Certainly, they'd question his judgment. It's not outside the realm of possibility that he would lose business, so much so that the firm would become unstable and he'd have to shutter the doors of his business once and for all. A business that he had spent his entire life building from the ground up. The guilt would ruin me. I couldn't bear the thoughts. I had become so lost in imagining the fallout of my tardy arrival that I didn't realize I was already dressed and out the door, walking at a breakneck pace to the streetcar, scratching at my belly, which was itching me terribly. My head spun when I turned the corner on Wolberstiegstrasse, only to see the streetcar pulling away. It would be another 20 minutes before the next streetcar came, at which point it wouldn't even be worth going to work. I would be better off heading directly to the post office to compose a contrite telegram for Mr. H.W. Towns, explaining that I'd failed him and the firm, and was respectfully resigning my position. Well, I would also need to send a telegram to the junior executives, explaining why they wouldn't see me again, while of course encouraging them to stay motivated and to put their trust in Mr. H.W. Towns despite his lack of judgment when taking me on as partner. I would then need to send a telegram to the city council. As soon as they heard word of my resignation, retaining my position of mayor would be entirely out of the question. I was so focused on composing the telegrams in my head that I didn't realize a car had pulled up in front of me and had been honking for some time to get my attention. I debated waving the car away, but since I was already so behind, investigating what the commotion was wouldn't do any further injury to my situation. It had also begun to rain, and I was without an umbrella, so taking refuge in the car and staying dry, if only for a moment, wouldn't be such a terrible proposition. I let myself into the car and shut the door when the driver hit the gas and sent us hurtling down Wolberstiegstrasse. "What's the meaning of this?" I shouted as the driver took a hard turn towards Kleiner Michel Catholic Church. We were halfway to the church when he finally turned to speak. "So long as we don't hit any traffic, we should be right on time for the baptism." The voice was familiar, but I couldn't quite place who he was or how I knew him. It wasn't until I got a good look at him that I realized it was my twin brother, Heinrich. I had entirely forgotten that I had agreed to be his newborn daughter's godfather, and that the baptism was this very morning, set to begin promptly at 8 a.m. I checked my watch, and it was 7:52 a.m. Relief swept over me when I remembered I had already let Mr. H.W. Towns know on Friday I wouldn't be in the office until the afternoon today. Of course, this was before he had made me partner in the firm. Was it possible that he'd expect me to be in the office this morning all the same, now that he had given me such tremendous responsibility? I began to sweat when I gave myself a moment to breathe and talked myself down. Mr. H.W. Towns was quite the family man himself. There were plenty of times he wouldn't be in the office so he could attend a wedding or a funeral or any other family or civic event that would require his presence. And, now that I thought about it, he had never let me know ahead of time when he wouldn't be at his desk. I felt, perhaps unreasonably, a twinge of anger towards my beloved boss. Here I was spending all morning agonizing over arriving just 20 minutes late when he himself had moments where he hadn't extended me the smallest of professional courtesies. I would need to go into his office first thing this afternoon and speak to him about this problem. We couldn't start out our partnership on the wrong foot. It was time to make some changes to eliminate hurdles in communication and work together as a team. I wouldn't come at him hard, of course. I would be entirely reasonable and professional. "Mr. H.W. Towns," I would say, "it's with the utmost respect that I would like to discuss a few bad habits we've fallen into." Haha, yes, I'd start with that. Of course, I would need to offer solutions rather than simply castigate him for his past behavior. I would further need to surface where I had failed him, so it wouldn't seem like I was attacking him head on. I combed my memory for instances where I could have been a better employee when I realized I was already on the altar holding Heinrich's newly baptized daughter in my arms. The priest was smiling, and Heinrich had his arm around my sister-in-law, Florentina. The two of them happily gazed at me with tears in their eyes. I smiled back when I noticed Kleiner Michel's Catholic Church was pin-drop silent. I didn't know how long it had been so quiet, and I came to the conclusion that the congregation was waiting for me to make a speech. Hot fear crept up the back of my neck, and my cheeks began to burn. I hadn't prepared a thing to say. The room spun, and I became short of breath when I calmed myself down and reassured myself I could successfully speak on my feet. I was mayor, after all, and my success depended on the ability to make speeches at the drop of a hat. I looked inward and spoke from the heart, forgetting for a moment how badly my belly itched. What can I say that hasn't been said already? My hope for this wonderful child, my newly baptized goddaughter, is that she, with the blessing of our Virgin Mary in her mercy— At this tiny addition, the priest winked at me and bit his knuckles, holding back tears. I continued, with the blessing of our Virgin Mary in her mercy, may our little, newly baptized babe learn efficient time management skills from a young age so that she might keep her eyes on the prize as she grows older, ultimately finding a vocation to serve her community and I dare say the Lord himself, in his glory, of course. I smiled and looked at the congregation. They gave me no response. I desperately looked at my brother and sister-in-law. They continued staring, expecting me to say more. I stammered. Amen, I finally said. There was a pregnant pause, and soon the entire congregation was clapping, cheering me on. That's our mayor, an older woman cried out, mascara running down her cheeks. I hadn't expected the speech to go so well. In fact, I felt a little guilty that I was the one being cheered on when it was in fact my goddaughter who should have been the star of the show. To correct this selfish mistake, I raised her in the air triumphantly. The congregation was immediately on its feet, giving us both a standing ovation. I was grinning from ear to ear when my identical twin brother, Heinrich, pulled me aside and whispered into my ear. Smashing, bloody smashing, he said. He spoke in a posh British accent, which I hadn't noticed earlier, and it took me off guard. I stared at him in shock when I realized the man before me didn't look like me in the slightest. It wasn't my twin brother, Heinrich, at all. I had allowed myself to get so swept up in his offer for a ride earlier in the day that I must have convinced myself that it was my brother, who I now remembered was overseas, fighting in the war. The man before me was an imposter, taking advantage of my position as mayor so that he might have an all-star cast at his daughter's christening. His daughter, whose name I didn't even know. I was too dumbstruck to voice my alarm and disgust and only managed to say, yes, God bless. Excuse me a moment. I handed him the baby. He gave me a hard pat on the shoulder and faced the congregation. I snuck into the sacristy to orient myself when it dawned on me that Townsend Kurtz Associates was on the second floor of Kleiner Michel's Catholic Church. I checked my watch. It was already noon, and Mr. H.W. Towns would be expecting me at any moment. Surely he'd be furious with me for being late, as I now remembered that I had agreed to be my niece's goddaughter, but the baptism wasn't until 3 Mondays from now, when Heinrich would be home on shore leave. The request for time off that I'd made to Mr. H.W. Towns was for 3 weeks from now, not today. I castigated myself for being so careless until I snapped back into the moment and focused on the task at hand. The sacristy was nearly completely dark, lit weakly by candles in the corners. I felt my way around the room when I finally found a staircase and climbed until I came upon a heavy door. I tried to turn the handle, but it was locked. A wave of panic rushed over me. Imagine what the junior executives would say if I showed up at work without my keys. Here I was, selected to be a partner at the newly named Townsend Kurtz Associates, and I couldn't even be trusted to remember a pair of keys. With a heavy heart, I mustered the courage to raise my arm and make a fist, preparing to make my presence known. I was just about to knock when the door swung open. Mr. H.W. Towns stood before me. His wiry white eyebrows were raised halfway up his forehead, and a look of bewilderment was plastered on his wrinkled, sagging face. "Arthur," he whispered, "I didn't expect to see you here." I was too shocked to speak. I had entirely forgotten that this staircase led directly to Mr. H.W. Towns' office. If I'd only taken a moment to orient myself back in the sacristy, I would have gone out the front door and snuck into my own office without him seeing me. An underhanded trick, to be sure, but at the very least, I wouldn't have disrupted Mr. H.W. Towns' important work. "Take a seat," he said, turning away from me and wheezing in disappointment. I sat down as he pulled out his chair and collapsed into it. He held his face in his hands and leaned over his desk. "Mr. H.W. Towns, I can explain," I said desperately, scratching at my stomach, but he cut me off. "Arthur, what am I going to do with you?" Tears stung the corner of my eyes. I was speechless. I prepared myself for the worst. "I was so proud of you last night when I made you partner at Towns & Kurtz Associates. I had a crew of men change the sign overnight. But of course you hadn't seen it if you came through the back door." My face flushed with shame. "And I'm proud of you still," he continued. Slowly, my spirits lifted. "Because just last night, after I made you partner at Towns & Kurtz Associates, but before I changed the sign overnight, like I said, I remembered you vowed you would, how did you say it? Subscribe to travel magazines. I was under the impression you were taking the week off, which is a much-needed vacation, I might add. I was so proud that you'd finally struck a proper work and life balance, which will surely make you an ideal partner, cut from the same cloth as myself, ready to serve the citizens of H with insurance plans at reasonable rates. But now I'm not so sure. I worry you'll work yourself to death." My mouth went dry. My mind raced as I tried to come up with some excuse. I dug my nails into my belly. It was then that I remembered I had called a travel agency the night before and planned a week-long vacation to the Riviera, which was much needed, to borrow Mr. H.W. Towns' phrase. Another detail forgotten. I remembered now that I was put on hold on the phone for so long that I had stayed up far past my bedtime, which would explain why I was so groggy in the morning and allowed myself to get so distracted while shaving. What's more, I had arranged for the plane tickets to be delivered to my office first thing in the morning by a hired courier. They should be sitting on my desk, plain as day. I explained all this to Mr. H.W. Towns, and as I did, a large smile slowly stretched across his face. When I told him the tickets should be on my desk, plain as day, he raised his fist triumphantly in the air. "Now that's my Arthur!" he shouted. But then he furrowed his brow, hunched over, and whispered across the desk. "However," he began, "if the junior executives see you in the office, it might set a poor precedent. They might think we don't respect their time off, and they might believe they're expected to work even when they've scheduled a vacation. Ha! Hold tight, dear Arthur. I'll sneak into your office and grab those tickets for you. Of course, they'll see me go into your office and might worry I'm not respecting your privacy." He rubbed his temples, then shook off his stress. "No matter. I'll come up with a foolproof excuse that not only calms their fears, but reassures them that privacy is of the utmost concern at Towns & Kurtz Associates." He rose to his feet and shook his fist in the air as he delivered that final line, beyond pleased with himself and excited for yet another initiative to motivate the junior executives. I had never been so in awe of Mr. H.W. Towns. And to think, earlier in the day I was frustrated that there were times he wouldn't extend small professional courtesies to me. But now it was clear that when he did omit small updates about his day or agenda for the week, it was because he had the success of the company at the forefront of his mind and couldn't be bothered with small details here and there. I resolved at that moment to send him a postcard from the Riviera to show my appreciation. Of course, I'd leave out how I was frustrated with him for imagined slights. No, that wouldn't be worth bringing up. Furthermore, I'd keep my list of thanks concise. Perhaps I would use bullet points so I could clearly catalog all the things he did for me, for which I was grateful. I was so wrapped up in composing the postcard in my head that I didn't realize I was in a taxicab that had pulled to a stop at the departure zone of the airport. I shook out of my daydream and attempted to pay the driver when he waved me off with a grin. I remembered then that Mr. H.W. Towns had called a car and snuck me back out the church, which by then was empty. He had already paid the taxi driver and given him quite a generous tip, I might add. Thanking Mr. H.W. Towns for the taxi cab and for collecting my tickets would certainly need to be mentioned in the postcard, each deserving their own bullet point. Although I had already thanked him profusely, surely an extra thanks wouldn't hurt. I scratched my stomach, then opened the door. I was immediately surrounded by reporters and various members of the press. There were microphones in my face, and I was sporadically blinded by flashing cameras. The reporters shouted, "The mayor is going on vacation! The mayor is going on vacation!" Of course, there wasn't a trace of disappointment or castigation in any of their voices. They, like Mr. H.W. Towns, were happy to see that I was finally taking some time off for myself, striking a perfect balance of work, civic duties, and leisurely pursuits would make me a stellar mayor, ready to tackle any adversity with my calm, collected, rough and ready attitude. I checked my watch. It was 3:54 p.m., and I still had plenty of time to make it to my gate. Never missing an opportunity to show my respect and appreciation for the great people of H, I took time to answer every one of the reporters' questions. They thanked me with a smile and a solemn bow, and we all, one by one, locked arms as I walked down to the terminal. I was in the midst of answering a question, giving the entirety of my attention to a reporter for the Free City paper, when a panicked voice cried out, "An assassin!" No sooner had I looked up when I saw there had been a break in the scrum around me. A squat man in a dirty suit, ragged fedora, and loose tie looked at me with crazy eyes. He pulled out a Smith & Wesson .38 Special from his suit pocket and took aim. "For freedom!" he screamed in a hoarse, high-pitched voice. A shot rang out. I fell back, holding my stomach, as the reporters wrestled him to the ground. He wailed insanely. "Ah! No! Ah! I'm serving my country and mankind!" I stared at the ceiling, clutching my belly. Blood seeped between my fingers. "Give him room! Give him room!" a woman shouted. Although I was clinging to life, I felt no pain. Neither did my vision tunnel. If this was dying wasn't so bad. I thought of all the things I'd achieved in my life. I was the youngest mayor in the history of H. I had made partner at an insurance firm remarkably early in my career, and I had loved and been loved. For the first time in a very long time, I was entirely in the moment, and I dare say, I felt happy. I shut my eyes and waited for the inevitable to come, when a voice shouted, "Cut!" The terminal went silent, and people shuffled away from me. A hand reached down and pulled me to my feet. It was Pierre Dulier, the actor made famous by his role in the sci-fi classic Solaris. I had entirely forgotten that he and I were co-starring in a movie that we were in the midst of filming, which was on schedule to wrap up production today. "Brilliant. Simply brilliant," he cried. He brought me to my feet. The entire cast and crew were applauding, many with tears in their eyes. The actor who played the assassin clapped loudly and gave me a reassuring wink. I waved and smiled to everyone, thanking them for their support. Privately, I was quite thankful for the coincidence that we were shooting the final scene at the exact moment that I arrived at the airport, as I had entirely forgotten that today was the final day of filming. Surely, I would have made an agenda if I had only woken up at 5 a.m. and not allowed myself to get distracted while shaving. I was grateful that I had gotten into costume and hidden the exploding blood pack in my shirt without thinking twice as I rushed out of the house. This explained why my stomach was itching the whole day. The cast and crew continued to clap as a voice called out, "Speech! Speech! Speech! Speech!" Soon the entire crowd was chanting. I waved them off and nodded. All was quiet. I took a moment to collect my thoughts. In times like these, it would be expected for the star of the film to routinely thank the director, the cast, and the production team individually, sharing a personal anecdote about each one. But I wasn't just the star of the movie. I was the mayor, a respected insurance associate, and a valued member of the community. It wasn't thanks the crowd was seeking, rather, advice. I took a deep breath and began. In times like these, you might expect the star of the film to thank the director, the cast, and the crew individually, and share a personal anecdote about each one. I won't be doing that today. That's not to say I'm not grateful. I'm thankful for each and every one of you. But I think it's more important for me to share some advice that I picked up along the way. Of course, I'm talking about waking up at a reasonable time and giving yourself the space you need every morning to make an agenda and stick to it. I suggest waking up at 5 a.m. I delivered my speech to my loving castmates, fellow citizens, and colleagues. They stared at me in awe, overwhelmed with gratitude. I allowed myself to bask happily in the realization that I might just be the greatest mayor in the history of H. Furthermore, I was an accomplished thespian, a trustworthy insurance associate, and a valued member of our fair city. I am Arthur Kurtz, lover of man and beast alike.
This story